From JBS Studios in Greater New York, this is the JBS News Update with Teisha Bader.
I'm Teisha Bader with the JBS News Update for Wednesday, August the 31st, 2022. Well, 50 years since the brutal murders of 11 Israeli athletes and coaches by Palestinian terrorists at the Olympic Games in Munich, Germany, some measure of justice has been achieved. Israel's Kan News correspondent Amichai Stein tweeted today that a compensation agreement was reached between the families of the victims and the German government, who will pay a reported 28 million euros in compensation, and the families will attend the commemoration ceremonies next week. That compensation amount, which is just over $28 million, has not been officially disclosed. Kan News also cited a joint statement from Israel's President Isaac Herzog and German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier saying that the agreement will not be able to heal the wounds, but it includes acceptance of responsibility on the part of Germany and recognition on its part of the terrible suffering of the victims and their loved ones, which we will commemorate, they wrote, next week. Herzog tweeted today of the agreement, writing that the main focus of which is a historical investigation, taking responsibility on the part of the German government, and adequate compensation for the bereaved families. It is important, he wrote, that justice is done and seen. Local Dutch Jewish community magazine NIW reported that it spoke to one of the bereaved, Ankie Spitzer, this morning. Spitzer, originally from the Netherlands, is the widow of Israeli fencing master and coach Andre Spitzer, among the slain Munich 11. She has been tirelessly fighting for justice for the last 5 decades. Spitzer told NIW, "I have the feeling that the circle is finally complete. We have now achieved everything we wanted to achieve," saying it is the intention that all 23 relatives sign the agreement today or tomorrow, saying she would be flying to Munich with her daughter for the official commemorations, which are taking place on September the 5th, 50 years to the day of the beginning of the 1972 massacre. Israeli Prime Minister Yair Lapid's office said today that he spoke over the phone earlier with U.S. President Joe Biden about the possible return to the Iran deal, saying the two spoke at length about the negotiations on a nuclear agreement and their shared commitment to stopping Iran's progress towards a nuclear weapon. The leaders discussed recent events as well as Iran's terrorist activity in the Middle East and beyond. In this context, the office wrote the Prime Minister emphasized the importance of the strikes President Biden ordered in Syria, and Biden emphasized his deep commitment to the security of the State of Israel and to preserving Israel's capability to deter its enemies and to defend itself by itself against any threat. Israel's leaders and Jewish organizations expressed their condolences today over the passing of former Russian President Mikhail Gorbachev at the age of 91. Lapid called Gorbachev a brave leader and great statesman who contributed greatly to the rehabilitation of relations between his country and Israel and opened the gates of the Soviet Union for the great wave of Jewish immigration to Israel in the 1990s. Herzog called Gorbachev a brave and visionary leader who shaped our world in ways previously thought unimaginable. Former Soviet refusenik Natan Sharansky spoke to the Times of Israel about Gorbachev's passing, and while praising him for the release of Soviet Jews, Sharansky said he believed that without the pressure and struggle by the Jewish world for Soviet Jews, supported by the late U.S. President Ronald Reagan and other world leaders, Gorbachev would probably never have done it. CEO of the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations, William Daroff, said, "Rest in peace, Mikhail Gorbachev, whose efforts to open Soviet society helped end the Cold War and the government's persecution of millions of Soviet Jews who could neither live openly nor freely emigrate." The American Jewish Committee tweeted Gorbachev oversaw increased freedoms for the Soviet people, the release of political prisoners, the exodus of Soviet Jews, the end of the Cold War, and the breakup of the Soviet Union. World Jewish Congress President Ronald Lauder called Gorbachev a great statesman, an advocate for freedom and human rights, and a true friend of the Jewish people who, through his actions, enabled countless Soviet Jews to return to their heritage. The New York Jewish Week reports that the New York Police Department is increasing police presence near synagogues in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, after an uptick in anti-Semitic violence in the area. NYPD Commissioner Keyshawn Sewell spoke to the press on Monday evening about 3 recent attacks.
Last Monday, while walking in broad daylight in this neighborhood, a 27-year-old man was approached by a stranger and struck in the face. A day earlier, 2 men, also walking in this neighborhood, were targeted and brutalized in separate incidents by another criminal. One of those victims, a 72-year-old, was sprayed in the face with a fire extinguisher. The other victim, a 64-year-old, was sprayed with a fire extinguisher and then assaulted. It is believed these victims were targeted because they are Jewish.
She said arrests have been made in all 3 cases, with charges including hate crimes.
No one deserves to be the victim of such senseless, hateful violence. No one. In the wake of these senseless attacks, we deployed around-the-clock house of worship cars to routinely visit synagogues.
Sewell also said they would be confirming security arrangements ahead of the Jewish High Holy Days next month. Taking a look now at our programming for tonight on JBS for Wednesday, August the 31st. At 7 o'clock, it's Talmud Study. At 7:30, Leslie Wexner discusses what Jewish leadership means. At 8, David Harris, outgoing CEO of the AJC, receives words of honor and tribute from Jewish leaders around the world during the AJC Global Forum this year. At 9, it's part 1 of Mark Golub Sit Down with Peter, Paul, and Mary's Peter Yarrow on the Chaim. At 10, author and scholar David Kaufman talks about the impact of Jewish celebrity on Jewish identity. And coming up next, it's Thinking Out Loud. And that's the JBS News Update for Wednesday, August the 31st, 2022. I'm Teisha Bader. Stay healthy, stay well.